I suppose in its most severe form, it is almost, in my view, a mechanical problem where the patient has, if you like, slipped not 1 degree or 1 gear of their personal engine, but they're right down trying to survive on just first gear, and everything suffers.
It's a prolonged state of sadness, which can be there all day and go on for days, a couple of weeks. And usually accompanying that, there is a state of lack of interest, lack of enjoyment, feeling of tiredness, and some physical symptoms like not being able to sleep well, loss of appetite, loss of weight, loss of libido. So it's quite a variety of symptoms.
They live in a grey, bleak, dark world where everything outside of their own inner feelings is black. And of course that's the extreme. And that's one of the more worrying things because it affects their physiological functioning. They don't sleep, they don't eat, they don't wash, they have no enthusiasms for anything. They lose all their zest for life. There's another form of depression, which is the generalized sadness and happiness of having to survive in this world with the various external pressures. And those people tend not to be so retarded in how they view their lives. They're almost excited and agitated and complaining. And it's my boss's fault, it's my line manager's fault. If my husband came home early, if my wife would do the cleaning, I wouldn't have to go down to the pub. And that's much more common. And that is what an awful lot of people understand by depression. And as a psychiatrist, yes, I recognize that, because that probably takes up 9/10 of people who present with depression.
And when those first stages of depression come, you feel you're not up to the job. You feel you're not doing the job properly. You feel that you're a con and it's only a matter of time till they find you out. And then the fear rolls on to, well, if they find me out, I'll lose my job and we'll lose the house. And in your mind, your whole world's collapsed around you. And none of it's true.
With depression, there are some important pointers to how seriously and how energetically one needs to move. If people are expressing suicidal ideas and have perhaps already taken an overdose, those are the kind of things that need to be taken seriously. It's very difficult to predict what will happen. There are some general pointers, so degree of distress, presentation of psychotic symptoms, those are the sorts of things that will make a difference. Interestingly, one of the most important things to be on the lookout for is the psychosocial elements to this. So if they live alone and are expressing suicidal thoughts, these are the sorts of people who need a lot of careful follow-up. Maybe they need a period of assessment in hospital just to be on the safe side. However, the reverse is not always the case. Simply because they have a family doesn't mean that they are going to be safe, and one needs to see what the attitude is of the family. The worst is if the family are hostile and take a pull yourself together attitude.
Relatives do not understand. I mean, it's very difficult for anybody who hasn't experienced actual depression. And I don't mean just a low mood, because we all sometimes feel low, but depression with all its symptoms and signs, you know, so that you feel that you can't do anything, you can't cope with anything. It's difficult for the relatives to comprehend that. So that's one thing. And the other thing about depression is that it has an effect on the whole family. If mother or wife is behaving in a way that is alien, that is strange, you know, that affects the husband or whoever it is, you know, or the children.
It can get, of course, to a stage where circumstances are so averse that they eventually end up, if you like, metaphorically lying in bed and not getting on with their lives. That in itself is pretty rare. And certainly in what used to be called endogenous biological neurotransmitter depression, slip to gear depression, if you like, there is no way forward. might as well be dead. But more importantly, there's often either a misinterpretation or a maljudgment or even a delusional understanding of how bad and rotten the patient feels. And this is often projected onto those close to them, whereby they feel they would be better off outside this world, and they will make a very serious attempt on their lives, and something like 10 to 15% of people of that type of depression consummate suicide.
The suicidal thoughts were dreadful when I came in here at first. You know, I had to choose the Jubilee line instead of the Northern line because the Jubilee line's got glass gates that you can't, you know, jump on the train. But when I thought about it, I could take the right line on the Underground. But there were some seconds where you didn't get to think through to the consequence. You just, in that fraction of a second, you could just, and that would have been it all over.
Yeah, obviously has to be taken seriously, but we have to understand what it means to the person. Suicidal behavior can be a form of severe depression, in which case it's very important that the person is actually kept safe and perhaps be admitted to hospital. Suicidal behavior is also a way of expressing how a patient feels or getting a message across. So in addition to keeping a person safe, we also have to try and understand the meaning of it and offer appropriate help to the person.
And really I didn't think it through when I took the overdose. There was no consequence other than death. So that bit didn't occur to me, and I suppose like any adult I have to take the consequences of what I've done. So I was looking for forgiveness from God and asking him to take the punishment away from me. And I have quiet times. And I have really, 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 really scared times. And I just want to go to sleep and never wake up.
Not all suicides can be avoided. If you look at the statistics, in spite of the facts that we have made strenuous efforts to try and understand suicidal behavior and treat it, we haven't been able to achieve much progress, and the research is still going on. I'm afraid we don't understand very much about suicide and what goes on in people's mind at the time that people attempt or successfully harm themselves. So we need to learn, we need to do more research and understand things.
The scary bit's the worst bit, I think, because I'm having to face now what I didn't think I'd have to face. Everybody's been really nice. But I still feel life wasn't meant to be, and really, you know, this is just the end of it. And
often other suicides are a misjudgment of the circumstances, whereby it is in a form of a cry for help, a cry for it to be noticed, a cry for things to change. And these people may also make attempts on their life which culminate in a suicide because they've miscalculated. The husband didn't quite come home when he should have done, or they're super sensitive to one of the drugs they took, and paracetamol is one of the most problematic because we don't know when we're going to go into liver failure from it. And aspirin, of course, is less popular. These days it's less prescribed. Plus, of course, the medications that some people prescribe for are often utilized, meaning the GPs who will use it. But so suicide is a major problem when you're dealing with what I call a decent depression. I suppose the major thing is that if one realizes, understands depression, one realizes that it's remediable. People can get better from it. That it is an illness, that it affects every element in the person's thinking, their concentration, the presentation, the way they feel, and it is important to understand that that can be a reason for non-performance or limited performance, because again, the knock-on effect of the various elements within the person's life. They are simply, I think, the nucleus or the core of a whole world, and it has a knock-on ripple effect. So for that reason, it's important, I think, to know that depression is an illness and that can be cured.
Obviously, if you're treating depression, you have to treat the symptoms, which make people difficult to work and cope with normal day-to-day life. So that's generally done by using antidepressants as a chemical substance, which helps to bring back the disequilibrium that occurs in depression with brain chemicals. It reverts back to normal.
There are a number of antidepressants, and the choice can seem bewildering. What I would suggest actually is a pragmatic approach to this, and to look at which tablets are sedating and which tablets are neutral or even alerting. And this is a good way of matching prescribing to the presentation. So if a patient is agitated, can't sleep, these are the sorts of people who do better with a sedating antidepressant. On the other hand, a patient who's very retarded, slowed up, poverty of thought, can't get going, then something that's neutral, potentially stimulating, will make a difference. Although there are a number of different biochemical groups of antidepressants, it actually doesn't correlate with clinical experience. So often we use drugs called SSRIs, and these are well worth using. They're easy to prescribe, patients respond very well to them, but that doesn't mean that other antidepressants will not be effective, of course, and there's no real way of telling which patients will respond to which tablets.
Very often, antidepressant medication is not enough on its own. I think one needs to look at the personality. One has to look at why this person has reacted in a certain way and whether they can unlearn ways of reacting to their environment or not. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But that's one of the ways. And that would be done in therapy, looking at things, looking at how behavior is connected to thinking and to feeling. Now I'm talking about, of course, cognitive behavior therapy.
Cognitive therapy essentially is looking at the way people think, and our thoughts relate to how we feel, how the body responds, and to how we behave. So what cognitive therapy does is try to look at the way people think about a particular situation to try and modify that thinking if it becomes irrational. So if someone's scared of birds and we determine that to be irrational, then we try and help someone look at the way they're thinking about it, because that affects their behaviour. What we try and do, for want of a better phrase, is try and get inside their head to understand their thinking, where their thoughts are, such as their own self-blame, their own sense of worthlessness, powerlessness, hopelessness. And from that starting point, we try and get them to see through cognitive therapy and other therapies that that's not necessarily the way the world is. It's probably just a feeling they have at this point in time, and that they can begin to see things differently if they start to feel differently.
How's it been for you over the last few weeks?
Much better. Yeah, much better. Still, anxiety is a huge problem, but if you take that away, my life is fine. Yeah, much more in control.
What about depression?
It's an occasional, it's an occasional thought, and then it goes away again. But it really is just every now and again, most of the time it doesn't bother me at all. It's a flash in the mind, and then it goes, and it just takes me back to where I was, but it's not very often.
Working with depressed people can be very hard work, dealing with someone's negative views of life and themselves all the time, and it can be hard to shift, can take a long time. But the rewards are considerable when you start to see someone come out of their depression, start to view life and themselves differently, start to show a smile on their face, and start to re-engage in their normal day activities.